Sema nini? Turejee kuangalia hayo. Very interesting photo there on the front page of the Standard. We have all three presidents of the East African nations, okay, the main, if I may call them that, EAC, the original, Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya, all dressed in military fatigues. Pale, it was Trinity of terror. Repression rising. So when Uganda's Yoweri Museveni admitted the two Kenyans had been tortured while in his country's custody, he unwittingly fanned the flames of repression spreading across East Africa. Once seen as the region's elder statesman, Museveni now speaks as the world still reels from the bloodshed that accompanied Tanzania's October 29 election that handed President Suluhu total victory and a new reputation for strong-arm rule. Now in Kenya, the soil has barely settled over the graves of slain youth, while others remain missing. East Africa is first beginning to resemble the 1930s Europe of Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, and Ion Antonescu of Romania. Now you see your comparison. Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, and Antonescu. You know, hey, anyway. So that's a comparison that's being made there. And they have a quote here by Yoweri Museveni. And some two Kenyans were arrested. They have been with us. I'm not able to remember their names. They came, they are working with Chagulani's group. That they are experts in riots. Of course, with our very good intelligence, we picked them up, and they have been in the fridge for some days. So casually. They've been cooling their heels. Now some Kenyan leaders rang me and said I should hand them back or put them in jail. So casually. And that's the story on page 6 of this paper. Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo were eventually released after 39 days in captivity. And now they're recounting their horrific tales from Uganda. The other headline still connected to that, Tanzania cracks down on senior opposition leaders. And that story, Trinity of terror, Samia's rule fuels East Africa's rise as repression hub. Back to page 2 of the Standard, kuna a story about how one of the Kenyan observers of the Tanzanian elections escaped death. I narrowly escaped death, Tanzania elections observer narrates ordeal. I was with this person in college, I think, a governance expert. And mtafuta niambie kulienda namna gani. All right, so that's the main story. On the back page, matters sports on the Standard. Ateta unhappy with how Arsenal conceded after draw at Sunderland. Yeah, very unfortunate because they would have actually opened up the gap at the top of the EPL table to considerable points. Now, wanasikia Man City wakibreathe hapa nyuma. That's the Standard.
Tukisonga mbele, the Daily Nation, abductions, how Museveni caved in. Admission, Uganda authorities had denied knowledge of the whereabouts of the abductees. Mounting pressure from the United Nations and the Kenyan government, direct family appeals, and fears over the health of rights activists Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo forced Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni to order their release from military detention. On Saturday, Mr. Museveni admitted that he had the duo arrested and detained, even as he bragged about the effectiveness of his country's security apparatus. That story is on page 2 and 3. How Museveni caved in, the two abducted on October 1st shortly after attending a campaign rally organized by Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine. Njagi and Oyo were in Ugandan military hospital for 1 week. Incarceration, the two were held in detention in Uganda for exactly 38 days. This story is on page 2 and 3 of the Daily Nation. They make mention of Tanzania in page 4. They say tribulations in Tanzanian cells. Kenyan returnees speak.
Well, they were saying that they were arrested in Tanzania simply for being Kenyan. Yeah. Now being Kenyan is almost illegal in Tanzania. So, you know, when I'm Kenyan, ingia ndani. Tutajua yengine baadaye.
Suluhu illegitimate ex-president asserts governance hammer criticizes BA's victory in Cameroon. On the front page, they say boost school infrastructure, head teachers now demand. And on the back page, Gor Mahia gunned down police, shoot to top of league table. Home team Bandari scored a chance to gain ground in title race. And Newcastle's miserable away form continues with loss at Brentford. That's the Daily Nation.
All right. So still focusing on Museveni and at least the release of those two Kenyans. Kenyans facing a lot of trouble in both Uganda and Tanzania, and that's the focus of most of our dailies. Taifa Leo chooses to go with our local politics and ile siasa ya pale Mlimani. Mimi tu ndio kusema Mlimani. Nani huyu? Ni Rigathi Gachagua aliyekuwa naibu wa rais. Gachagua ashauri wakazi wa Mlima kumsikiza yeye tu, akidai vyama vingine vyote isipokuwa DCP ni wheelbarrow. Hata Jubilee. Lakini Uhuru si alisema waache kumtusi. Sema afurahi na akasema atawafukuza kwa hiyo chama. Mkiendelea hivi nitawafukuza. You know, that's a real threat. Sema nitawatoa hapa mbio. Ni siasa tu. Gachagua anasema hayo siku mbili tu baada ya Uhuru Kenyatta ambaye ndio kinara wa Jubilee kuwahimiza wakazi wa Mlima Kenya kumheshimu Gachagua licha ya rais huyo mstaafu kuonekana kama anayetoa ushindani kwa DCP kupitia chama chake cha Jubilee. Habari kamili kwenye ukurasa wa pili. Tutakuja kuzungumzia haya tukiwa na wageni wangu wa asubuhi ya leo. Mengine yaliyopewa kipaumbele kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa gazeti hili la Taifa Leo ni pigo, Trump akifuta ziara ya makamu wake Kenya. Hii ni baada ya Trump kusema hatahudhuria kikao cha G20 Afrika Kusini. But Trump is being very selective. So he said that the government in Tanzania, in South Africa, is actually against the white South Africans. They say white South Africans are being killed. And so he decided now America will not be part of the G20 summit in South Africa. That's why we were expecting J.D. Vance to travel to Kenya as he heads to the summit. But now he said no American official will attend the G20 summit. So hata J.D. Vance haji. Ni sawa tu. Lakini anashughulikia hiyo alafu anashughulikia Wakristo kule Nigeria. Lakini Sudan hana shughuli sana.
South Africa nayo inaweza support. South Africa is very xenophobic though.
Well, kuna shida nyingi kule. Tukirejea hapa nyumbani, Nyanza ibaki serikalini. Nani amesema? Hii ni waziri wa kawi Opiyo Wandayi. Anawasihi wakazi na viongozi wa Nyanza kutojiondoa katika serikali jumuishi baina ya ODM na UDA. Lakini UDA sasa ndio unaanza kuisikia. Watu walikuwa wamesahau kuna chama kama UDA. Kwingineko, masaibu tuliyopitia Tanzania ni wanafanyabiashara wa Kenya waeleza walivyoteswa kwa siku 8 ndani ya vituo vya polisi kule Tanzania kwa kusingiziwa kuwa walikuwa waandamanaji. Kule ukiwa tu ni Mkenya kuna shida. Masuala ya spoti pale juu, Chelsea fiti, Arsenal na Man United hoi. Ni kweli tu masuala ya spoti mtazungumziwa mengi kwenye Monday Blitz. Fred Arocho, Katela Messi watakuwa hapa. Kwingineko, Museveni akiri kutesa wa Kenya. Kiongozi huyo alijigamba namna alivyowafungia Njagi na Oyo katika friji. Na anasema tu hivyo. And they forget that there are Ugandans here in Kenya as well. Very unfortunate. Taifa Leo.
People Daily, regional shifts ahead of 2027 race, tectonic plates, they say. Kule Rift Valley, Ruto's fortress stays firm but certainly not flawless. Recent move to tame KANU in the region could be a sign of tension in his own backyard. Kule Mount Kenya, the mountain is aligning itself behind Jubilee Party leader Uhuru Kenyatta and DCP's Rigathi Gachagua. In Ukambani, Kalonzo clings to his crown as Kenya Kwanza tries to woo the region with roads and jobs. Coast region, ODM's tide recedes as the coast tests life beyond Raila's shadow. And in the Western Kenya, the Luhya Unity song plays again as Mudavadi and Wetangula face the rising force of Natembeya. That's the only story covered on the front page of the People Daily. People and politics.
It was tectonic plates. Zimeshift kiasi. Very interesting. All right, matters business. World Bank's new conditions freeze 96.9 billion shilling Kenyan loan. This multilateral lender wants measures to cut budget deficit. Loan disbursement was expected before end of June. Now, how this will impact on the Kenya's fiscal space, you can follow more on page 2 of the Business Daily. Safaricom raised a stake in Ethiopian unit to 53.3%. That's another story. Na maswala ya head teachers who are calling for smooth transition to senior school, also featuring there. Remember senior school, walimaliza junior school, JSS, walimaliza exams last week. So now the focus is on how they will transition to senior school. On the ticker, student loan defaults hit 380.6 5 billion has helped cash woes deepen. Dutch firm grants 8 billion to cut water prices at the coast, and State eyes 15-year bond for 390 billion SGR Malaba line. That's the Business Daily.
Finally, the Star, multiple fees to hurt Kenya's tourism appeal, and industry players fear losing to more affordable competing markets. The story is on page 4 and 5. It says, increased game park entry fees and changes in payment systems have thrown Kenya's tourism and travel industry into disarray, and sector players fear losing to more affordable competing markets. And higher costs will translate to job losses if tour operators, hotels along safari circuits and inside parks, suppliers and related businesses reduce operations due to international tourists shunning Kenya for cheaper African destinations. Now, kama walikuwa na strike on November 5th here, has been covered on the front page.
Gate charges za kwenda parks zimekuwa very high, and you see we're heading to the holiday season. Most families will want to experience that, but it's true. KWS has hiked their fees for entry to national parks significantly.
Ruto accuses opposition of dragging Kenya back as XDP dismisses first world ambition. It's another story on page 9. Pilgrimage to Bondo. Hordes of mourners continue to flock to Raila's final resting place. On the top strip, museums discovers early tool making that survived 300,000 years. That's the Star, fresh, independent and different.
Right, so those are basically the kind of headlines that we'll be looking at with my panelists. Kipruto Rapkiro, a veteran politician, will be in studio alongside governance analyst Kathy Rungu and Wakili Kibe Mungai in a few minutes, so do stand by for that conversation. Later on at 8, we'll be switching to Matter Sports with the team led by Fred Arocho and Katela Meisi discussing the weekend sports. Let's take a look at what the cartoonists are talking about.